Okay, today's episode is for anyone who has thought about picking up knitting. Maybe you've been following along here for a while, or a friend keeps talking about it, or you've literally been Googling how to start knitting at 11 p.m. when you actually should be sleeping. This episode is for you. Hi, and welcome back to Knit Your Stress Away. This is Nadine, and let's get into this episode. Welcome to Knit Your Stress Away, the podcast for moms who want to knit instead of scroll. I'm Nadine, and I help overwhelmed moms swap doom scrolling for knitting so you can finally have 20 minutes of peace that don't involve a screen. Whether you're brand new to knitting or getting back into it after years away, this show will teach you how to use knitting as a tool to calm your nervous system, set boundaries with your phone, and reclaim time for yourself without the guilt. No fancy techniques, no complicated patterns, just some practical tips, real talk about stress and motherhood, and simple ways to make knitting a part of your everyday life. So put down the phone, grab your needles, and let's knit the stress away, one stitch at a time. Hi, friend, and welcome back to the podcast. This is Nadine. I'm so glad you're back here this week with me. And if you felt like I was talking to you there in the beginning, if you're a beginner knitter or maybe you haven't even started yet, and you're like, wow, I don't even know where to start, this one is completely for you. Starting your first project is a big deal, right? And I am here to help you start this off on the right foot. We're talking about what to knit first, why it matters more than you think, and how to make sure that you actually stick with it, because I've seen this over and over and over where people are like, oh yeah, I got all this stuff and, I watched some videos and I started, but then I stopped. And I don't think it's for me. Heard it so many times. So let's get into it. So here's the thing most knitting tutorials will skip over, and that is that your first project is not necessarily about the project itself. It's actually about building a relationship with the craft. Right? When you're stressed, like super tired, end of the day, kids have been touching you all day, brain won't stop thinking, won't shut off, that kind of stressed, and your nervous system is running hot. What you don't need is more stimulation, and what you don't need is a complicated pattern, and you don't need social media or anything else that involves a screen that gives you more stimulation, right? Your brain needs something to do with your hands that will take your focus into something tangible. And that is obviously where knitting comes in. But when you're a beginner, you might be stumped on what to pick for your first project so that you actually can get this kind of relaxation and this nervous system reset from your knitting project. And if your first project happens to be too complicated, like cables or a lace or more than two colors, you are going to spend more mental energy figuring out the pattern and figuring out how to do this than actually relaxing. And it will not go quick, and you will be struggling, and then you'll quit, and then you'll decide that knitting is not for you. And that would be a damn shame because it is for you. You just started in the wrong place. So let's talk about how to start in the right place. The goal of your first project isn't necessarily to make something beautiful, which isn't to say that you can't make something beautiful, just a side note, but the real goal and the main goal is to make something repeatable that actually helps you practice the craft. And when I say it out loud, it makes complete sense. You're like, duh. Again, it can still be something really cute and fun. You can make something in a cute color that you enjoy. But the main thing is to find a pattern, and there's plenty of them, trust me, that is simple and repetitive enough to where you can practice over and over and over until it clicks, right? I also highly recommend for you to keep that first project, whatever you end up making. I want you to keep it because I wish I did. I really do. Mine was when I was in my teens. I don't even remember what it was. I remember making a bunch of loops with my crochet needle or with my crochet hook back with my grandma in Germany. And I would just sit on the couch and do that with her. So that was my practice, to just do the same repetitive motion over and over. But I know that eventually I made a sweater that she helped me make, but that was not the first thing I made, obviously, because it also was striped. So there was a little bit of technique involved. I don't remember what I made. And I wish I did. I really do. And I wish I had kept it. But We want to make something where your hands learn the movement so well that eventually you don't have to think about it at all. That's when the real magic happens. That's when knitting becomes meditative, even though it might feel a little stressful in the beginning, right? It's normal with everything that you learn that's brand new. And this is where I'm telling you to stick with it until you get to that point where it feels like second nature. I would even say that it's like riding a bike or learning how to drive. It's funny that I'm using that as an example because some of my kids are currently learning how to drive. And, not being from this country originally, I did not realize what I was getting myself into because this is not how we learn how to drive in Germany. But that I digress. But where I was going with this is that it takes some effort in the beginning and it might not always be fun. And it seems like this crazy thing that you'll never learn, right? I remember my kids in the beginning like, oh my God. Or maybe it was just me thinking it about them, like, oh gosh, this is terrifying. But it didn't take long and it clicked, right? So it's like this. It may not be fun in the beginning, but it won't take long. And once it clicks, you get it. And it then becomes almost second nature. And that's where knitting becomes your stress busting tool. And that's where we want to get. Okay, so what should you actually make? Let's give you some options here so that you can go on a hunt for some patterns. And just a little spoiler alert, I'm going to have a couple of example patterns in the next episode for you that we're going to talk about, and we're going to highlight a couple of ones. But you can also just go and look for some on Etsy. Etsy has great patterns. You can go on Instagram and just find some designers that have some simple patterns. Or you can go on a place called Ravelry, which is either an app or a website, ravelry.com. And you can just browse around there because they have amazing patterns. And every designer pretty much has their pattern listed in there. So option one, you can make a dishcloth or a tiny little coaster for your tea or coffee cup. And I think those are so cute. It's my number one recommendation for a complete beginner because they're small, they're flat, they are square, and usually it only uses the basic knit stitch, which usually would end up in a garter stitch pattern, which is those squiggly line pattern that you see. And it'll be done in maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks. It depends on how much time you can spend on it and how, easy this is coming to you. But you get this like, I made something without having to wait like weeks or months like I am currently, but that has to do with the fact that I'm working on like 6 or 7 projects at the same time. So don't be like me in the beginning. Do that later. Start with one thing. But honestly, a handmade dishcloth is quite useful too, right? It's not just going to sit in a drawer. You'll actually use it. Or the coaster. Personally, I prefer the coaster because I love tea and I love cute mugs. So having a cute coaster to go underneath, I think that's great. Okay, option number 2. This is a little bit bigger. A simple scarf. Same idea though. It could be the knit stitch back and forth. Not a lot of shaping. It's literally a long rectangle, right? The only downside here, obviously, it takes a little longer to finish because a scarf has to be a certain length. So it's definitely not the tiny little square that makes a coaster. So hopefully that's not too discouraging. Again, go with the coaster if you want to just be doing something really quickly. But if you do go this route and you make a simple scarf, choose a chunkier yarn. And we're going to talk about your tools that you need in this episode as well here in a bit. And then, of course, bigger needles because they go with the bigger chunky yarn so that it grows fast and you can actually see your progress really quickly. Also, another side note is when you do use a thicker yarn and a larger needle, you actually can see your stitches really well and it works really well for beginners. Option number 3 is just a small swatch square. That's a tongue twister. Swatch sounds super technical and boring, but hear me out. If you are truly starting from zero and you just want to practice a stitch without any pressure to finish something, then you can just make a little piece. It can be a rectangle, it can be a square. It doesn't even matter what the shape ends up being. And truth be told, you may drop a stitch here or there and it's not even the shape you want it to be in, but you can use it later on if it came out cute. You can put it under a flower pot, you can frame it. Doesn't matter. The point is, get the needle movement into your brain, right? Without worrying too much about a finished product. I say what you shouldn't start with, even though it looks adorable and it might seem small, but don't start with socks and don't start with mittens. You could start with a beanie, but a beanie can be complicated because number one, it's knitted in the round. It's not a super complicated thing to do, but I want you to have the basics down. So you need to know how to do the stitch before you start knitting in the round. And also a beanie has shaping at the crown at the top because it needs to shrink a little smaller. There are a couple of beanie patterns that I now think about that I made. Oh my gosh, when did I make those? I remember making these when my kids were little. That's so funny. It's just a big tube, and you don't shape it at the top. You just make it like a rectangle tube shape, if you will, and then you just close off the top. And then those two little corners that you create on the left and on the right, you just kind of sew them back like little ears. You sew them back onto the beanie, and that's how the shaping of the head happens. And those are so cute. I have not seen a pattern like that. And I just thought about it while I was talking about a beanie, that those exist as well. So you don't need to shape the crown necessarily. You could make a beanie just by knitting straight up without having to decrease and increase, which is a little bit more on the advanced side. Don't let that scare you though, because once you have this down, you can start with those challenges right away. But I want you to get into that repetitive motion first, and in that repetitive feeling where you can be like, you know what, I'm tired. I just want to do this for 10 minutes. I'm picking this up and I know exactly what to do, and I don't have to feel like, oh gosh, I don't even know where I'm at in my pattern. This is too complicated. I'm not doing it, right? So give yourself permission to start simple, because simple is not beneath you. Simple is exactly where you need to be if you are a beginner, or if you someone like me who picked up knitting after 20 some years and was like, I remember doing this, but I don't quite remember how to do this. And, it'll come back real quickly, but why start complicated and then throw in the towel when you can start simply with something really adorable and, doable, and then you can move on to something more complicated. Okay, let's talk supplies, because this is where a lot of people get overwhelmed and then they never even start, or they buy some random stuff and don't know if it's the right thing, and then they also don't start. So you don't need a lot, for sure. In fact, really all you need is yarn and needles. Like everything else is a bonus later, and there are things that you need later for certain patterns, but for something, or one of the things that I mentioned in this episode, all you need is yarn and needles. So I want you to get a smooth, light colored, that's important, either medium weight or bulky yarn. So the medium weight is also known as worsted weight, and it's known as the number 4 on the label for the on the yarn, or bulky, which has the number 5. Bulky, or some people refer to it as chunky, but on the actual label it'll say bulky and number 5. Light colors are key because you can actually see your stitches. If you have yarn that's too fuzzy or too dark, it can hide everything. It's really hard to see where your stitch starts and where you have to insert the needle. So it's super hard when you're a beginner. I would go for a simple acrylic yarn. One of my favorites is called Color Story from Lion Brand, and it's an amazing choice that you can knit with for all seasons, which is awesome. So you can make your sweater for the winter time, and you can make a shirt, tank top, or anything like that for the summertime. And I would say stay away for now from anything fancy, hand-dyed, things that are expensive. You're just a mom who needs a stress outlet for now, and you're trying to learn to knit, which doesn't mean that you can't indulge in that kind of yarn later, but for now I would stick with the yarn that's affordable, but still gorgeous. So Color Story is a great option. That's the worsted weight. For a bulky yarn, I highly recommend Hue and Me. I'm going to put these names in the show notes so you don't have to worry about spelling and whatnot. But both of them are from Lion Brand. You can get them online. You can sometimes, if you're lucky, get them at your local Michael's, but it depends. Mine doesn't carry them. So I'll put the links in the show notes so you can find them there. As a matter of fact, I don't have to put the links in the show notes because I just realized I actually have a page that you can find at theknittingmamas.com that has all my favorite beginner tools, and it includes the yarn that I just mentioned. Okay, the second tool is a pair of needles. It depends on which yarn you're going for, what size of needle you need. So the thinner the yarn, the smaller the needle, and then, of course, the thicker the yarn gets, the bigger the needle needs to be. And the yarn label will usually tell you what size to grab. If you're not sure, a size 8 is usually a great in-between needle, but I recommend just looking at the label depending on which yarn you end up getting. I highly, highly recommend circular needles. Don't even start with the straight needles. To me, they're just ugh. They're bulky. They are in the way. They're not very flexible. They're not great on your wrists, on your hands. Things get too heavy on them. I have multiple reasons why I'm not a fan of them. Even though they look cute when they're made of wood, they're adorable, but there are so many really pretty and very, very good quality circular needles. They're connected by a cable in the middle, which is also awesome because you never lose the second needle or drop it for that matter. But they're much easier to handle, and you can literally use them for any kind of project. There may be the misconception out there that you can only use a circular needle for a project that is knitted in a circle. Not true. You can use it for any flat or circular project. Again, all of these are also on my beginner tools little page that is linked up. Link will be in the show notes, but you can just go straight to theknittingmamas.com, and it is there. You might have to scroll down a small bit because it has a bunch of links on that website. So that is all you need. You don't need even a knitting bag yet. You could, throw it in a little bag, but you don't need to spend a fortune just to get started. You don't need any stitch markers, fancy accessories, subscription boxes, whatever. You name it, it's out there. But try to keep it simple for now until you really, really get into it. So yarn, needles, and I don't know if you knew this, but I actually have a YouTube channel for some beginner videos, which I'm also going to link up in the show notes. That is all you need. And I hope you enjoy those videos. I've made those a few years ago. They're still out there. They're totally free for you to watch. But now let's talk about that moment when the knitting starts to click. There is a moment. It's different for everybody, but it's totally real. It's kind of like that moment when it clicks when you ride your bike or when you drive your car. For some people, it happens in 2 days. For others, it might take 2 weeks, but there is a point where your hands literally, they stop fumbling, they start flowing. You're going to stop looking at the needles and think about every move that you make with them, and you actually start looking at the yarn, and your brain that has been running 100 miles an hour that day, it calms down, and you don't have to focus so much on it, and you can just relax. And it's amazing. And it doesn't happen because you forced it to, but it happens because it has something to do that did not require to perform, to produce, to help somebody else, right? It's just something that you can concentrate on. That is the moment knitting becomes this amazing thing, your go-to for calming your nervous system and for relaxing and for de-stressing. This hopefully will be becoming your favorite hobby and your favorite tool for regulating your nervous system. I know it's mine, and it took me a long time to get back to it, right? Again, for 20 years, I didn't even remember that I knew how to knit. When I discovered or rediscovered, hey, this is a thing. I can do this. My gosh. I mean, I'm just so glad. I'm just so glad. And I'm just so glad that I get to show up here to tell you all about it so that you can hopefully also indulge in that same relaxation, creation, of beautiful things. It's absolutely worth the awkward beginning to get there. I can tell you that 100%. So I would highly recommend give yourself at least 2 weeks before you judge it, before you throw that yarn out. It's going to feel a little clunky, completely normal. It's essentially your hands learning a new language, right? So give them some time. They're going to get there. And I think I told you in a previous episode that I'm currently teaching my youngest, who's 13, to crochet, and she picked it up super duper quick. So there's hope for all of us. All right, here's what I want you to do after this episode. A little homework, if you will. I want you to go get your supplies, go to the link below in the show notes, click on the links there, or go to your local yarn store, make some notes from this episode or from the show notes as far as like the size and the type of yarn you want. Go to your local yarn store or your Michaels if you have one. Grab them supplies. That is it. You don't need anything else to start. Yarn and needles. And then hop over to my YouTube channel where I have the videos for beginners. You can also download my free guide. It's called Swap Scrolling for Stitching. It has a beginner's cheat sheet. It has the list of tools to grab. It has a glossary for beginners so that you're not like, what the heck does that mean? That is knitting lingo and I have no idea. And it's all together in the same download. So once you're grabbing that, you're off running and you can get started. If you have any questions, if there's anything that is not clear, you can always reach out to me. You can You can comment on the podcast, as a matter of fact. You can leave a review. You can let me know there. But it's easier if you just go to Instagram, and my handle is _. If you go there, you can send me a DM and I'll be happily assisting you. If you already have needles and you aren't sitting in a bag somewhere that you bought 6 months ago with really good intentions, take this as your sign. Pull them out tonight. Cast on something small. Go to Ravelry or to Etsy. Find a simple pattern. Don't make it a big deal. Just try it out, right? You're ready. I know you're ready. You just have to start. And I can't wait to hear all about it. Again, please hop over to Instagram at _. Let me know. You can tag me in a story. You can just send me a direct message and I'll be happy to reach out and answer. All right, you guys, thank you so much for listening. I am just so happy to be showing up for you here every week, and I hope you enjoy the episodes as well. And I will see you next Wednesday, same place. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you're ready to swap your screen time for some peace, I made you a free guide called Swap Scrolling for Stitching. It'll teach you what to buy, how to start, and how to build the habit, even if you've never touched needles before. And if you already knit or crochet, this will help you build that habit into your life consistently. Link is in the show notes. And if this episode resonated with you, I would love it if you'd leave a quick review. This helps other stressed moms find the show and discover that there's a better way to unwind than scrolling Instagram at 10 p.m. Follow me on Instagram at _the_knittingmamas_ for daily tips, and I'll see you next week for another episode.